Kazuma Satou was a shut-in NEET loser who had been holed up at home and sleep-deprived, gets Isekai'd into this adventurer realm with a goddess that's just as useful as Sakura, but he is to form a useless crew and has to find and defeat the Devil King. Kazuma, the ultimate hermit gamer, headed back home after grabbing a game. Suddenly, he spotted this girl about to get flattened by Truck-kun. Acting fast, he dove to shove her out of harm's way. Next thing he knew, he was chilling in this weird dimension, and there was Aqua, a goddess, revealing to him that he had kicked the bucket-average isekai protagonist style. Kazuma, all proud of himself for sacrificing his life to save that girl, got a reality check from Aqua. Turns out, what he thought was Truck-kun was just his harmless cousin, Tractor-kun.
What?
That would have stopped on its own. Poor Kazuma. He died merely from sheer shock, and now everyone, even his own family and Aqua, were laughing at what was possibly the stupidest ever way to die. Aqua, after laughing off her stress, infuriated Kazuma even more by admitting that heaven was a snooze fest. So she pitched this wild idea of sending him to this RPG-style world to take down some Devil King dude who had been wreaking havoc. She even sweetened the deal by promising him any awesome power or gadget he wanted, and he'd automatically speak the local language. But Kazuma caught her trying to hide a warning about potentially frying his brain in the manual she showed him. Classic Aqua. While Kazuma went through a stack of leaflets, Aqua's impatience started getting on his nerves. So just to mess with her, he picked her as his cheat item. Immediately, an angel stepped in to take over Aqua's job of handling the departed souls and revealing that the gods would grant any wish if Kazuma pulled off the mission. Next thing he knew, they were magically whisked away to Axel City. Once the initial thrill of landing in a whole new world wore off, Kazuma realized he was stuck with a panicking Aqua who was about as helpful as a broken compass. And to top it off, she couldn't even bug out until they whacked the Devil King. Kazuma and Aqua strolled into the Adventurer Guild, thinking it was where all the adventure kicked off, you know, like in those adventurer games. But their excitement fizzled out quickly when a ruffian dude pointed them to the receptionist and told them that they had to cough up some cash to register as adventurers. As they sweated over what to do, Aqua spotted a priest and decided to flex her goddess of the Axis Order status, demanding some cash. But plot twist, the dude was from the Eris Order, all about worshipping Aqua's junior goddess, Eris. Awkward. Still, he gave her some spare change out of sheer pity. Tough day for Aqua's ego. After shelling out the cash, Luna, the receptionist, laid down the lowdown on adventurer classes and cards. But when they got their stats checked by this crystal ball thingy, Kazuma was bummed to find out he was stuck with the basic adventurer class, although he did max out on luck. Meanwhile, Aqua's stats were so off the charts, the whole guild's jaws hit the floor. She had the VIP ticket to be an archpriest, but she had little luck and little intelligence. Basically, Kazuma was a weakling with dummy luck, and Aqua was a powerful dummy with no luck. Instead of diving into adventures right away, they decided to take it easy for a few weeks. They became construction workers, knocking on the grounds every day, and knocking back a few drinks with friends at night, living the glamorous life. But eventually, reality hit Kazuma.
Man, I'm dead.
This wasn't the kind of life they were supposed to be living. They were supposed to be adventuring, not slacking off. So Kazuma went to talk to Aqua about it, and they agreed to start going on adventures. Kazuma wasn't impressed with Aqua's habit of snoozing till noon like Snorlax, all the while whining about their pathetic financial situation that landed them in stanky stables. But despite his disgust, he couldn't help but spend ages just watching Aqua snooze in her PJs. When it was time for their first real gig, taking down 5 giant toads in 3 days, Kazuma wasn't exactly geared up for battle. All he had was a dinky little short sword and his stupid-looking outfit. So, there was Kazuma, with his tiny legs pumping like crazy as he bolted through the grasslands with a giant toad hot on his heels. This thing was no joke. It could chow down on livestock or even a person without breaking a sweat. And Aqua was proving ever useful by giggling away like it was a big old joke, which it was clearly not. But when Aqua started laying down her terms for saving Kazuma, the toad suddenly changed its mind and went for her instead. The toad easily consumed her as she wasn't really much of a threat, Neither was she the sharpest tool in the shed. But luckily, as the toad started its slow-motion snack time, Kazuma seized the chance to take it out. Aqua was all tears and hugs, thanking Kazuma like there was no tomorrow, but he was too busy being grossed out by the toad goo covering her. In an attempt to win back some points with Kazuma, Aqua charged at another toad, thinking she could land the finishing blow with her God Blow move. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. Instead, she ended up as Toad Chow again, leaving Kazuma to swoop in and save her once more. Back at the Adventurer Guild, munching on some fried toad, Aqua threw out the idea of beefing up their team with some new recruits. Kazuma wasn't too keen, but he's got no choice, he was outnumbered. So the next day they slapped up a recruitment ad, hoping for someone top tier, but nada, zilch, zippo. Just as they were about to cut their losses and settle for less, in walked this little chick with red eyes, rocking some serious archwizard vibes. She introduced herself in classic Chunibyu style as Megumin, but before she could even finish her grand entrance, hunger cut her off and she collapsed. While Kazuma was busy wrestling with Megumin over her eye patch, trying to figure out if it was just for show, Aqua gave information on Crimson Demons, like Megumin, super powerful mages with quirks that'd make even the weirdest RPG characters blush. After sorting out some grub for Megumin, they hit the road outside town, ready to take on those pesky giant toads with their new eccentric teammate in full effect. So, Aqua busts out her God Requiem move on this big old grey toad, only to end up as Toad Chow again. You would think she would learn by now, but nope, she was still a toad magnet. Meanwhile, Megumin wasn't one to sit back and watch. She started chanting away, preparing to unleash her explosion magic, and with a flash and a boom, she turned this distant purple toad into a smoking crater. But unfortunately, that loud bang woke up another toad nearby. Now poor Megumin was pooped from her spellcasting, and before she could catch her breath, she was on the toad's menu. Then there came the casual Kazuma jumping into the scene again, saving both of them and completing the mission. Later that day, while Kazuma was carting Megumin back to town, she bragged about her explosion magic. It was so darn powerful that she could only whip it out once a day before she was out like a light. But the thing is, she was so fixated on explosion magic that she wouldn't even look at learning anything else. That means that she was almost as completely useless as Aqua and her mentor, Sakura, as she could only use the magic once before passing out. Meanwhile, Aqua was all about flexing her skills, bragging about mastering every bit of Archpriest magic, and then some flashy but useless party tricks. Kazuma attempted to give Megumin the slip, but she wasn't having it. Nope. She made such a ruckus right there on the streets that he was left with no choice but to reluctantly hang on to her. A new way of solving problems learned. While the girls were off getting squeaky clean, Kazuma was left to collect the measly rewards for their quest. And as he counted their pennies, he couldn't help but feel bummed that they were still too low level to tackle anything tougher. But just when things seemed bleak, in walked Darkness, a crusader, offering to join their merry little band. She looked all tough and promising, the perfect redemption point for this useless party, with Kazuma even pitifully fawning over her as she was equally hot and had the right proportion of intergalactic melons. But Kazuma noticed that something was quite off with her in the way she was introducing herself. Kazuma noticed Darkness getting all red hot and bothered over some wild story about him supposedly getting down and dirty with Aqua and Megumin in some slimy shenanigans. But then Darkness gave an underwhelming account of her not-so-impressive combat skills. She was as tough as nails but couldn't seem to hit the broadside of a barn. Kazuma was about ready to send her packing, but when she heard about the potential horrors their party might face, she was even more excited about joining up. Kazuma didn't have much of a choice and reluctantly accepted her into the party as well. The next day, Kazuma pulled up at the Adventurer Guild just in time to catch Aqua showing off her nature's beauty skill. Kazuma wasn't impressed though. To him, it was just another one of Aqua's flashy but useless party tricks. Then Megumin dropped some knowledge on him. Apparently, he could learn skills by watching other people do them. But before he could wrap his head around that, he slipped up and called her a loli, angering the loli, I mean Megumin, in the process. Just when things couldn't get any weirder, Darkness showed up with a thief that sadly had no melons. It could make an old man cry. Her name was Chris, and she offered to teach Kazuma some thief skills in exchange for some bubbly. Kazuma was game, so they hit the streets for a lesson. Chris decided to show off her steal move and scored Kazuma's wallet in the process, as she had little luck and was working purely on skill and thieving instinct. But those were rookie numbers for Kazuma when he tried to steal it back. Due to his maxed out luck, instead of stealing back his wallet, he accidentally snagged her panties instead. Chris got really embarrassed, and Kazuma, ever the cultured individual, celebrated his prize of sheer hard work, determination, and grit. Darkness, however, watched in awe and oddly wished she was the one in that situation, humiliated and embarrassed as the weirdo she is. Back at the guild, Chris got all emotional, telling everyone how Kazuma somehow talked her into trading his wallet and her treasures for her panties, painting him in a not-so-flattering light. Kazuma's reputation took quite a punch, and he was left red-faced. Trying to salvage what was left of his dignity, Kazuma decided to show off his steal move but ended up snagging Megumin's panties instead, worsening the situation. But despite his blunders, Darkness was still determined to join up. And even though Kazuma rejected her, she was oddly even more thrilled about it. With his companions agreeing to let Darkness tag along, Kazuma tried to spook them by mentioning taking on the Devil King. But instead of running for the hills, Darkness and Megumin were all fired up. As chaos descended upon the town, Luna blasted out an emergency quest over the airwaves. People scattered in a panic while adventurers rushed outside the city gates. Kazuma arrived with his crew, and he was left scratching his head when he found out their mission, capturing a swarm of flying cabbages making a beeline for Axel, so many cabbages that would make the Cabbage Man from Avatar the happiest man alive. The adventurers went into a frenzy, scrambling to grab those precious greens. But Darkness couldn't seem to land a hit with her sword. Instead, she played the hero, shielding her comrades from the veggie onslaught, even if it meant her armor and clothes took a beating. While everyone marveled at Darkness's selflessness, Kazuma had a different take. He saw it as some sort of twisted pleasure she got from pain. Meanwhile, Megumin wasn't one to mess around. She immediately started chanting her spells and blasted the entire swarm to Kingdom Come with her explosion magic, sending adventurers flying left and right. Kazuma got to work grabbing a bunch of those airborne cabbages, but he was left feeling a bit sour when Aqua, the one he wrote off for her nature's beauty skill, ended up using it to clean the cabbages with some pure water and even healed the injured folks. Seems Aqua wasn't so Sakura after all. Later that night, they all gathered around to chow down on some fried cabbage. Turns out, even veggie quests had a silver lining. And to cap it all off, Darkness decided to make things official and join Kazuma's party. Needless to say, he wasn't exactly thrilled about it. Looks like he had himself a full-blown team now, whether he liked it or not. Kazuma decided it was time to up his game and learn some basic magic for conjuring up elemental goodies. Meanwhile, Darkness and Megumin spent on some sweet upgrades with their cabbage haul, a new armor for Darkness, and a shiny magic manatite rod for Megumin. But poor Aqua's luck took a nosedive when Luna broke the news that her cabbage stash was filled with cheap lettuce, slashing her reward down to almost nothing. And to top it off, she had already blown through what little she had. Typical Aqua. Desperate to dig herself out of debt, Aqua turned to Kazuma for help. And when sweet talk didn't cut it, she resorted to some good old-fashioned blackmail. With a hefty sum in his pocket from the cabbage bonanza, Kazuma found himself reluctantly footing the bill to settle Aqua's debt with the guild hall. Looks like Aqua had some serious charm, or maybe it was just plain old manipulation. The following day, with a desire to blend in more with the fantasy crowd, Kazuma ditched his jersey for something a bit more fitting for the realm. He figured he'd ease his party back into adventuring with some simpler quests, especially since Aqua and Megumin were still recovering from their toad trauma. But his hopes were killed when he learned that one of the Devil King's big shots had set up camp near Axel. And as luck would have it, all the wimpy monsters had gone into hiding, leaving only the super tough quests for the taking, making it a sink or swim time for the crew. In the weeks that followed, Kazuma found himself tagging along with Megumin on her daily explosive workouts. They headed out to this deserted castle way out in the woods where Megumin could let loose without worrying about getting scolded by the city guards for the racket. And of course, Kazuma was there to lend a hand when Megumin inevitably crashed from the sheer force of her magic. Meanwhile, Aqua was grinding away at odd jobs, putting together fake flowers and peddling veggies to make ends meet. And as for Darkness, she was off to her home turf for some serious training. Everyone had their way of leveling up. Frustrated and fed up with the whole quest to defeat the Devil King, Kazuma seriously considered throwing in the towel. This made Aqua sad, and she complained to him about what was at stake if he abandoned the mission. In a fit of rage, he let loose a barrage of insults at her, reducing her to tears. But just as tensions reached their peak, Luna called for all adventurers to gather at the city gates. There, they came face to face with Beldia the Dullahan, one of the Devil King's top dogs, who was furious about someone blasting explosion magic at his castle, day in and day out. We all know who did it. As the crowd of adventurers eyed a seemingly innocent female wizard, Megumin boldly stepped forward, boasting about her skills and seizing the opportunity to take down Beldia once and for all, despite his only wish being for her to knock it off with the explosions. As tensions escalated, Megumin reached out to Aqua for help, but before she could act, Beldia hit her with a deadly curse set to take her out in a week. However, when Darkness stepped in to shield Megumin, since being a tank is the only way she could be useful, she ended up cursed instead. At first, Beldia found amusement in the idea of Megumin being tormented by guilt, but his tune changed when Darkness started fantasizing about him blackmailing her into some seriously scandalous scenarios, with Kazuma holding her back. Beldia declared that he would lift the curse if Megumin could make it to his castle, guarded by a bunch of undead minions. As Beldia took off, Megumin and Kazuma were left with a newfound determination to storm the castle and save their friend. But just as they were gearing up for the challenge, Aqua swooped in and broke the curse on Darkness with her sacred break spell, leaving Kazuma and Megumin dumbfounded and the other adventurers cheering. Aqua proved once again that she may not be Sakura in disguise. Once again, Kazuma found himself lamenting the lack of wonder in their so-called fantasy life, but before he could dwell on it further, Aqua interrupted, insisting they take on quests to chip away at her debts. When Aqua zeroed in on a quest to put an end to a turf war between a manticore and a griffin, Kazuma stepped in, going against her choice. Instead, he nudged her towards a task involving purifying a lake near Axel, in hopes of getting rid of the brutal alligators that had been causing trouble. With Aqua's unique ability to purify water just by touching it, the task of purifying that lake was easier than finding filler episodes in a long-running shonen anime. However, purifying an entire lake took time, during which monsters could potentially attack her. So, she requested the rest of the party to act as guards, but instead of providing protection, Kazuma opted for a more unconventional approach. He rented a small iron cage from the guild and locked Aqua inside it. Surprisingly, Aqua accepted this humiliation with relative silence, something Darkness would be rather happy for. The party transported the cage to Riverhead Lake, where they lowered it into the shallows. From a safe distance, Kazuma, Megumin and Darkness watched as Aqua let her goddess essence seep out into the water. However, their discussion took an unexpected turn towards the topic of going to the toilet. As Aqua worked to purify the lake, the brutal alligators began to gather around her. She cast purification spells furiously while the reptiles bit and tossed the cage around. Despite the chaos, after a few hours, the lake was purified and the brutal alligators were eliminated. Traumatized by the ordeal, Aqua refused to exit the battered cage, instead requesting that the others transport her back to the city in it. I guess she's never beating the Sakura allegations after all. As Swordmaster Mitsurugi Kiyoya, accompanied by his companions Cremia and Fio, returned to Axel after a quest to subjugate an ancient dragon, he stumbled upon a distressing sight, his beloved goddess Aqua being carted back in a cage. Unable to bear seeing her like this, he promptly broke open the cage to set her free. Aqua, cheered up by the unexpected rescue, bid farewell to her companions and prepared to depart. However, before she left, Kazuma reminded her of who she was. Though she struggled to recall who Mitsurugi was, she left with a renewed sense of her own importance. In a fit of anger, Mitsurugi confronted Kazuma, blaming him for bringing Aqua to their world subjecting her to a cage and making her sleep in a stable. He offered to let Kazuma's companions join his party, but they all declined, expressing their dislike for him. Mitsurugi challenged Kazuma to a duel with Aqua as the wager. In response to Mitsurugi's challenge, Kazuma accepted. But instead of engaging in a fair duel, he resorted to a surprise attack, distracting Mitsurugi and stealing Gram, the cursed sword. With Gram in hand, Kazuma swiftly knocked Mitsurugi out. As 𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐏𝐲 and FIO began telling Kazuma off for his actions, he threatened to use his steal ability on them to scare them off. This shut-in NEET never learns, does he? The next day, tensions ran high as Aqua confronted Luna about a significant deduction from her quest reward to cover the cost of the cage Mitsurugi broke. Meanwhile, Mitsurugi approached Kazuma, calling him out for his alleged mistreatment of women based on what Chris told him. Before he could say more, he was met with a fierce punch from an angered Aqua, demanding payment for the damaged cage. As Mitsurugi and his companions left in frustration, Kazuma found himself in hot water once again. It didn't help matters that he had already sold Gram, Mitsurugi's sword, adding insult to injury. Just when things couldn't get any worse, Luna broadcasted an urgent message for all adventurers, especially Kazuma's party, to assemble at the city gates. There, they faced the wrath of 𝐿𝐷ia, who was upset they failed to show up at his castle as promised. Kazuma exploded in anger when he learned that Megumin and Aqua had been continuing their daily explosion exercises at the abandoned castle. Meanwhile, 𝐿𝐷ia vented his rage at them for supposedly letting Darkness die from his curse. To everyone's surprise, Darkness stepped forward, deeply flattered by 𝐿𝐷ia's unintentional compliment of calling her a model knight. 𝐿𝐷ia, shocked to see her still alive, was left speechless. Aqua couldn't help but laugh at 𝐿𝐷ia's failure to realize that his curse had been dispelled. Seizing the opportunity, she cast Turn Undead, which inflicted a painful effect on the Dullahan. 𝐿𝐷ia was surprised to encounter someone as powerful as Aqua in Axel. In a bid to assert his dominance without T-posing, he summoned an army of undead knights and commanded them to slaughter the city's inhabitants. However, things took an unexpected turn when the undead knights, instinctively seeking salvation from a goddess, targeted Aqua instead of following 𝐿𝐷ia's orders. As they ran after her, Aqua and Kazuma seized the opportunity, running straight at 𝐿𝐷ia before swiftly evading his grasp. With 𝐿𝐷ia distracted, Megumin stepped up and unleashed her explosive magic, casting explosion on the group of undead knights. The powerful blast earned her new nicknames from the other adventurers, impressed by her display of strength and courage amidst the chaos. 𝐿𝐷ia, however, survived Megumin's explosion, because why not? As a band of adventurers launched an attack against him, 𝐿𝐷ia retaliated with deadly precision, throwing his head into the air to gain a strategic bird's-eye view, and swiftly cutting them all down like a samurai testing a new katana on bamboo sticks. With Mitsurugi, the city's trump card, left weaponless and unable to intervene, Darkness bravely charged forward to confront 𝐿𝐷ia. However, all her attacks missed their mark as usual, and 𝐿𝐷ia's counterattacks shredded her armor and clothes, sending her into another fit of fantasizing. What a freak she is. Seeing an opening, Kazuma attempted to use his magic, creating water to catch 𝐿𝐷Ia off guard. However, 𝐿𝐷Ia dodged the attack, prompting Kazuma to try freezing him in place. Kazuma attempted to use steel on him, but unfortunately, his attempt to steal 𝐿𝐷Ia's sword failed due to their differences in levels. Kazuma had this lightbulb moment, realizing that undeads are super weak to water. So he got the other mages in on it, and they started conjuring up water like there's no tomorrow. But 𝐿𝐷Ia was quick on his feet, dodging the attacks like a cracked Fortnite player that maxed out on mobility. Then Kazuma worked his magic on Aqua, convincing her to go all out with her sacred create water. And the flood she summoned was so intense, it actually messed up the city's walls a bit. With 𝐿𝐷Ia weakened by all that water, Kazuma swooped in and pulled off a slick steal, nabbing his head like it was nobody's business. Then, Aqua did her thing, purifying 𝐿𝐷Ia away for good. Meanwhile, Darkness was off in her own world, saying a prayer for the adventurers who bit the dust in the battle. But turns out, Aqua already brought them back from the dead. The next day rolls around and the guild is buzzing with celebration. The adventurers are all kicking back and enjoying a few drinks. Kazuma takes a moment to gather his party and drop a declaration. Now that they're swimming in wealth, he's ready to retire from the adventurer life and go back to being a shut-in NEET loser. But just when they think they're in the clear, Luna drops some news. Their party is getting a special reward for taking down 𝐒𝐓𝐍𝐊, but they also have to foot the bill for all the damage that Flood did to the city. Suddenly they're staring down some hefty debt, and Kazuma's determination to defeat the Devil King is reignited so he could leave this world as it started to suck again. On a bone-chilling winter day, while other adventurers cozy up indoors enjoying their spoils from taking down 𝐒𝐓𝐍𝐊, Kazuma finds himself wishing for more cash to tackle their massive debt. As he scanned the quest board, Kazuma rejected suggestions from Darkness and Megumin for quests involving white wolves and one-punch bears. But then something caught his eye. A quest to scout out this thing called the Destroyer. After some back and forth, Kazuma and Aqua ultimately settled on a quest to take out snow sprites. It wasn't exactly what Kazuma had in mind for his grand money-making scheme, but it was quite something. And while Megumin may have been unsettled by the choice, Darkness was all fired up. Dressed for the refrigerating weather, Kazuma and his crew made their way to the snowy forest where the snow sprites hung out. As they walked through the snow, Kazuma swung his blade, taking down the fleeing sprites while Aqua scooped up others to bottle them for later use in cooling down during the summer heat. Megumin, exhausted from unleashing her explosions, collapsed after dealing with a few of them. But just when they thought they had it under control, things took a turn. The Winter Shogun, guardian of the snow sprites, made its grand appearance. Darkness, caught up in the excitement of facing a foe that resembled a shogun from Japanese lore, eagerly engaged the guardian, only to have her sword sliced clean through. Realizing the gravity of what's going down, Aqua released the captured snow sprites and advised her companions to drop their weapons and prostrate themselves for forgiveness. But Darkness, too proud to bow down, stood her ground. In a desperate attempt to save her, Kazuma rushed forward to push her head down in a gesture of submission. But in his haste he forgot to drop his own sword, and before he knew it, he had lost his head to the Winter Shogun. In the afterlife dimension, Kazuma found himself face to face with Eris, who offered him her condolences. Frustrated and full of complaints about his reincarnated life and his party members, who thankfully made it out okay after the Winter Shogun's attack, Kazuma vented his frustrations. But just when Eris was about to send him back to Japan for another shot at life, Kazuma was hit with a wave of emotion. Surprisingly, he found himself overcome with longing for his companions, and tears began to flow. Just as things were getting emotional, Aqua hit him with Scorpion's Get Over Here, calling for Kazuma's soul to return to his body. Turns out, she had already cast the resurrection spell on him, and in a move that surprised everyone, she boldly overruled Eris's laws against opening the door of the afterlife by threatening to confiscate her chest pads. With Aqua's intervention, Kazuma's journey wasn't over just yet. Looks like he had some unfinished business to attend to with his quirky crew. Back in the parallel world, Kazuma was met with relieved hugs from Megumin and Darkness. But he wasn't feeling particularly grateful toward Aqua for resurrecting him. In fact, he was downright disappointed, especially when he compared her to Eris. Feeling a bit disillusioned and thinking his crew was too weak for winter quests, Kazuma decided it was best to steer clear of those for now. But when they returned to the guild, Aqua revealed a surprise: a captured snow sprite she had been hiding. Kazuma immediately saw an opportunity to claim the kill reward for himself and demanded that Aqua hand it over, but she had other plans. She refused to let anyone kill the sprite because she wanted to use it as a refrigerator. Frustrated by his companion's quirks and oddness, Kazuma couldn't help but feel let down. In his eyes, Eris was the true heroine of this story, and he wasn't quite sure what to make of his gluttonous and oddball companions anymore. Aqua tried to warm herself by the campfire outside the freezing stables, but Kazuma quickly put a stop to her plans of using his tracksuit as fuel. Later they headed to Wiz's shop, where Kazuma found himself constantly intervening to prevent Aqua from purifying the lit shop owner. As they interacted with Wiz, who had the big melons, Kazuma learned that unlike 𝐒𝐓𝐍𝐿, Wiz was actually one of the Devil King's generals, but not like the others. She didn't harm people, and instead helped maintain the magic barrier around the Devil King's castle. While they enjoyed the tea Aqua demanded from Wiz, Kazuma expressed interest in learning lich skills. Wiz agreed to teach him Drain Touch, but things took a dangerous turn when Kazuma decided to demonstrate the skill on Aqua. She nearly got purified before Kazuma intervened, just in time. After the intense encounter with Aqua's purification, Wiz, feeling weakened, handed them a commission from a real estate broker. Their task was to purge the ghosts haunting an uninhabited mansion once owned by a nobleman. As part of the deal, they get to live there while they work. The party moved into the mansion, rolling up their sleeves and going Levi cleaning mode to clean away the dust and cobwebs. As they settled in, Aqua started recounting the life story of the ghost haunting the mansion. But when night fell, they discovered that someone had helped themselves to Aqua's treasured bubbly. Furious, she stormed through the mansion, casting Turn Undead on any ghost she came across. In the middle of the night, Kazuma woke up with a desperate need to use the toilet, only to find himself surrounded by eerie dolls. He panicked and fled to Aqua's room, pursued by the floating figures. But when he burst into Aqua's room, he was greeted not by the goddess herself, but by a frightened Megumin, who also urgently needed to use the facilities. With no help from Aqua or darkness in sight, the two of them ended up bickering over who got to go first. Their argument was interrupted by more dolls bursting in through the window, sending them running for safety. Finally reaching the toilet, Kazuma rushed Megumin out without waiting for her to finish. As they locked themselves in another room, the dolls continued their relentless pursuit. Megumin started chanting incantations for an explosion spell, but just as Kazuma was about to make a desperate escape, he realized that Aqua had already purified the possessed dolls. Looks like they were safe, for now. The next day, Kazuma and Aqua headed to the guild to collect their rewards for purging the ghosts. But when Luna revealed that the ghosts infested the mansion because of a magic barrier preventing them from entering the nearby public cemetery, Kazuma had a sudden realization: it was all Aqua's fault. Under pressure, Aqua confessed that she set the barrier to avoid the hassle of purifying the cemetery every day. Feeling guilty, they decided not to accept the reward. Later, Wiz visited a grave in the mansion's yard while Kazuma busied himself with cleaning. But just when he thought he was done for the day, he had to spring into action to save his tracksuit from becoming firewood. In the living room, Megumin and Darkness were engrossed in a board game that looked a lot like chess. Meanwhile, Aqua, ever the pest, nagged Kazuma to give her the prime spot on the sofa by the fireplace. Kazuma reluctantly gave in, feeling sorry for her and realizing that her intelligence wasn't likely to improve anytime soon. The next day, while wandering downtown, Kazuma spotted Dust and Keith hanging around an alleyway. They confessed they were gathering the courage to enter a cafe run by succubi, a place known only to male adventurers, very, very cultured male adventurers. Kazuma decided to join them, and they headed into the cafe together. Inside, Kazuma found himself seated next to the ruffian. Yes, he's cultured too, while the receptionist Succubus explained how the cafe worked. Essentially, it offered men the chance to experience realistic plot-filled dreams in exchange for a bit of their vitality. A dream, but a dream come true. Excited by the prospect, Kazuma eagerly filled out his request form. But instead of naming a specific partner, he asked for a beautiful, culturally inexperienced older woman. Returning to the mansion, feeling like he's the man, Kazuma discovered his companions cooking up a feast with the crabs sent by Darkness's family. They all eagerly dug in, savoring the delicious meal. However, when Aqua proposed drinking hot bubbly from the crab shells, Kazuma declined. After all, he didn't want to risk getting too drunk and missing out on his dream experience later. Feeling a bit anxious after Aqua's mimicking antics, Kazuma decided to hit the sack early. But as he lay in bed, nerves got the better of him, and sleep seemed elusive. Finally, he decided to unwind with a relaxing bath. The warm water soothed him, and before he knew it, he was dozing off in the bathtub. Startled awake, Kazuma found himself face to face with a naked Darkness who had just entered the bath. Believing his dream had begun, he confidently ordered her to wash his back. Initially taken aback, Darkness was both unnerved and excited by the sudden manifestation of her submissive fantasies. But as things escalated, Darkness grew increasingly anxious about the possibility of Aqua or Megumin catching them in the act. Despite her worries, she found herself unable to resist Kazuma's demanding commands. However, their intimate moment was abruptly interrupted by Aqua's alarmed shout about an intruder. Rushing out to investigate, Kazuma discovered a newbie succubus trapped in the magic barrier set up around the mansion by Aqua. Realizing that he wasn't actually dreaming, Kazuma decided to cover for the succubus's escape. Unfortunately, his actions led Aqua, Megumin, and Darkness to believe he had been charmed by the succubus. They promptly took matters into their own hands and gave Kazuma a good beating. The next day, Kazuma initially pretended that he was under the succubus's control as he tried to make amends with Darkness. But suddenly, he switched gears and started blaming Darkness for their cultured encounter. Before the tension could fully settle, Luna interrupted with an emergency broadcast announcing the approach of the mobile fortress destroyer approaching Axel. As Luna was telling everyone to evacuate and adventurers to meet up at the guild, Aqua and Megumin were all set to bolt from the oncoming mobile fortress destroyer, which Darkness swore was going to wreck everything in its path. But Kazuma wasn't having it. He refused to abandon his new crib. During the guild meeting, Kazuma, prompted by Chris, devised a plan to counter the ancient weapon set to arrive in Axel within the hour. Meanwhile, Darkness took up a position outside the city walls to stand guard while construction workers hurriedly erected barricades. During this tense moment, Darkness confided in Kazuma, revealing her true name and noble lineage. She wasn't just any adventurer, she was a noblewoman charged with defending her land and people. As the destroyer rolled into view, Aqua hopped up on the city walls, and with a flick of her wrist, she busted through the magic barrier using her sacred break spell. Megumin and 𝐒𝐶 wasted no time, bombarding the thing's legs with explosions until it screeched to a grinding halt. But just as the other adventurers started celebrating their victory, the destroyer pulled out an Uno reverse card. It broadcasted a warning about its impending self-detonation, sending a chill down everyone's spine. Instead of making a run for it, Darkness did the most Darkness thing ever and charged straight at the destroyer, all hyped up on her freakish excitement. And of course, the rest of the adventurers, thinking she was on a heroic mission to stop the detonation, tagged along for the ride. Well, some of them at least were also keen on saving the succubus cafe. Meanwhile, outside the fortress, Megumin was stuck, unable to move an inch. Inside, Kazuma led Aqua and 𝐒𝐶 on a mission to find the control room. They stumbled upon the grim scene of the head researcher's remains and dove into his diary. Turns out, the guy only started building the destroyer to dodge getting executed. But things went from bad to worse when the fortress went berserk, wiping out the very kingdom that cooked it up in the first place. In a last-ditch effort, 𝐒𝐶 pulled a power move and drained some magical juice from Kazuma using her drain touch. With her batteries recharged, she whipped out some random teleport magic and zapped the Koronatyte, the destroyer's power source, where Kazuma pointed. But the destroyer had been cooking up so much heat that it was practically a walking inferno, ready to torch the whole city. Everyone scrambled to get the heck out of there, leaving the blazing behemoth in their dust. As they moved it to safety, Kazuma decided to play the hero once again. He siphoned off some of Aqua's power and channeled it into Megumin, who conveniently had been carted along by the ruffian. With her magical fuel tank topped up, Megumin unleashed her second explosion of the day, blowing the destroyer to smithereens. Safe to say, it went out with a bang. Life in Axel started to get back to normal, but just when everyone was getting comfortable again, a squad of knights rolled in from the royal capital. Kazuma and the gang were all ears when they showed up at the guild, but things took a nasty turn when the prosecutor dropped a revelation. Turns out that Koronatyte Kazuma had zapped away ended up obliterating the local governor's mansion, and now they were slapping him with a treason charge. Kazuma took his crew to 𝐒𝐶's shop, where Yunyun suddenly popped up from behind some shelves and challenged Megumin to a showdown. Turns out, Yunyun had been lurking around the shop just to run into Megumin. 𝐒𝐶 revealed Yunyun's little secret. She had been hanging out at the shop, hoping to run into Megumin. Feeling a bit awkward, Yunyun tried to play it cool by grabbing a random choker from the shelves, pretending she was there to shop like a regular customer. Darkness invited Yunyun over to their pad, and Yunyun wondered if she was just being polite. But things escalated when Megumin started shaking Yunyun, causing her to drop the choker right into Kazuma's lap. He tried it on, thinking it was just some funky accessory, said to grant wishes. 𝐒𝐶 broke the news to Kazuma with a heavy heart, that the choker he was wearing was a popular item among ladies trying to shed a few pounds. But wait, there's more. It wouldn't come off until the wearer's wish was granted. If not, it would start tightening, and in just 4 days, it would be lights out for the wearer. Kazuma found himself in a bit of a bind, clueless about the wish that got him into this mess. The girls all felt guilty, each blaming themselves for the situation. But Aqua, being Aqua, brushed off any responsibility, confident she could just bring Kazuma back if the worst happened. However, Kazuma said that he wasn't keen on coming back to this world after reincarnation. Instead, he'd rather skip the whole Devil King showdown and debt repayment gig. This declaration prompted Aqua to rally the troops, declaring they'd fulfill whatever wish Kazuma had, even if it was too cultured for them to handle. Back at the crib, Kazuma got all bossy, making Wiz his pillow, commanding Darkness to work out San's armor, and ordering up snacks and drinks from Aqua. Then he roped Megumin and Yunyun into a game of strip, rock, paper, scissors. The stakes were their clothes, yes, in a rather cultured manner. Megumin and Yunyun started purposefully tying every round. But Kazuma wasn't having it. He laid down the law: if they tied again, they both would lose a piece of clothing. When Yunyun inevitably lost the next round, she wasn't too thrilled about the consequence, tearing off Megumin's clothes in frustration. But things got serious when the choker wouldn't budge. Kazuma kept making obnoxious demands, even getting a bit handsy in the hot spring, lying on Wiz's humongous melons, and having Darkness fan him. Meanwhile, Megumin and Yunyun cosplayed Bunny Girl and School Bloomers. When he asked Wiz for a kiss, the girls decided they'd had enough. Aqua snapped at him to get serious before time ran out. The last day rolled around and Kazuma said his farewells, sparking a tearful group hug. Then, in a surprising turn, he talked about how he really felt about the girls. Turns out the choker popped off because his wish for comfort got fulfilled. But the girls were not amused and sent him packing to Eris. And that's a wrap for our wild adventure with Kazuma and the gang. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of misadventures, don't forget to smash that like button and hit subscribe for more hilarious tales from the world of anime and beyond. Until next time, stay awesome, stay mischievous, and may your wishes never come with a deadly choker. See you in the next video.